Hello, friends. Today we'll be discussing the rule of the Congress, which lasted from 1937 to 1939. And in the elections, in my last class, we discussed that the elections were held in 1937 and Congress had come out as the victorious party. Initially, before the elections, with the coming of the Government of India Act 1935, both Muslim League and the Congress were not in favor of the Government of India Act 1935 because of certain points which told them, openly that British was still keeping all the power under its control. So Muslim League and Congress both were not happy with it. These elections were being held under the Government of India Act 1935, and therefore both the parties were not in favor of these elections. But because of their vested interest and their they saw that with contesting these elections, they'd be able to spread their message across the whole of India. They decided to contest the elections. However, Congress, after the elections, had won an overwhelming victory, and therefore Nehru decided to form cabinets in 8 provinces. But before forming these cabinets, he took a guarantee or an assurance from the Viceroy of India, who at that time was Lord Linlithgow. He asked him that he should promise that the provincial governors will not interfere in the working of the provinces, which was a point mentioned in the Government of India Act 1935, that the provincial governors had the right of interfering in the provinces. In two cases, if the rights of the minorities were being threatened, number one, and if there was a threat to the province as such, a security threat. In those cases, the provincial governors had the right of interfering in the provinces. Now, Nehru, however, he got a promise from Lord Linlithgow that there will be no such interference from the provincial governor. However, they did not stop there, whereas the areas where the Muslim League had won as the single largest party. I discussed this earlier, how you can win as an absolute majority or you can win as a single largest party. If you win as a single largest party, you cannot form the government on your own. You have to get the cooperation from another party and form a coalition government. Here also, Muslim League needed the support of Congress, but Congress refused to cooperate. So, the animosity that Congress had for the league members and the league, it became very evident after the elections. In some provinces where the Muslims were in majority, the Congress accepted, okay, let's allow the Muslims to form the government, but only and only if the people who were coming to the forefront were not from the Muslim League. Okay, so this was again a political move, and which was unacceptable for the Muslim League. Now, Jinnah, during all these years, had been warning that if the Congress comes to power, then Muslims will have to, face severe consequences. And these warnings and fears had come true in the form of Congress tyranny. Now, let us look at what this Congress tyranny was. Now, after coming to power, the Congress, it adopted certain measures to that further intensified the hatred that had started to grow in the hearts of the Muslim population for the Congress. Now, the Congress stance, had been such that it manifested its prejudice and deep hatred for the Muslims, and therefore the Muslims also began to, start craving for a separate homeland or some sort of freedom, which they earlier had not. Okay, let's discuss the first step that they took. The first step that they took was Bande Matram. What is Bande Matram? It was a nationalistic song, and what was wrong with this song was that it contained elements which instigated the Hindus to expel the Muslims from Hindustan or cleanse India of all the Muslims living in it. And it was made a must that this nationalistic song, this national song, had to be sung at the start of the day in the provincial assemblies. Now, this was unacceptable for the Muslims. Secondly, they introduced a Varda scheme. This was an educational scheme, and this was a brainchild of Mahatma Gandhi. According to this scheme, teaching in schools would be in the Hindi language, and spinning cotton by hand would be introduced as school curriculum. In the school curriculum, there will be no religious education in schools, and the students of the schools would be made to bow before the picture of Gandhi. Now, this was preposterous and insane, a tactic of forcefully converting the Muslim children into Hinduism, and hence was unacceptable. Okay, now let's talk about the Congress tyranny in general, what happened in different provinces of India. Now the Muslims started to sense a threat to the Muslim culture, which from the from the Congress rule. And in many places, the Hindu extremism resulted in introduction of inhuman rules and regulations which were indigestible for the Muslims of India. Like, uh, you know, um, the Muslims were forbidden to eat cow, and they were forbidden to slaughter the cows. And if they did that, then they were brutally punished for that. Azan, the call to prayer, was also banned. And during the time of prayers, there would be noisy processions which would be led in front of the masjids. So that was a big disturbance for the Muslims. Then pigs were also pushed into the masjids. And there were anti-Muslim riots throughout India, through in many of the provinces. And the Muslims in these riots, Muslim houses and Muslim properties, they were set on fire. Okay, now, during this time, the British were busy. Why were they busy? And what was their response to the Congress tyranny? Linlithgow, the Viceroy of India, he regarded Congress rule as oppressive, but no measures were taken because they were busy. They were busy because the Second World War had started, and Britain went to war with Germany in September 1939. Meanwhile, because of the growing influence of the Muslim League, Congress started to regard it as some kind of a party, but still they did not consider Muslim League as a representative of the Muslims living in India. Okay, now let's discuss the questions that can be asked from this topic. This topic is very important and has been asked several times in different ways. So please devote your energies in studying this in detail. Question can be asked like, explain how Jinnah transformed the Muslim League between 1937 and 1939. It can come as a 7-mark question. You have to write 3 paragraphs and a concluding line. We discussed how Jinnah transformed Muslim League. Just to mention all the points that we discussed briefly, he started to focus on reorganizing the party, and for that, he started to develop support for the party from the grassroots levels. He started touring the whole of India and giving motivational and inspirational speeches, and the membership of the party grew. In an annual meeting was held in 1938. I did not mention this, so that's also an important point, where a women's subcommittee was held, set up under Fatma Jinnah. So this shows that Muslim women also started to take part in politics and enter Muslim League. And then, because of all these efforts that Jinnah was making, the ministers of Punjab, Assam, and Bengal, they finally accepted to join the Muslim League. And then a day of deliverance in 1939 was observed. Now, this was, an end to the Congress rule. It marked an end to the Congress rule. We have not discussed this because today we talked about Congress tyranny. Specifically, I'll be discussing Day of Deliverance later on in my next lessons, so you don't have to worry. But when this question is asked, you have to talk about the Day of Deliverance. Then finally, you can conclude by talking about 1940. What happened in 1940? We all know it was the time of the Pakistan resolution. When this Pakistan resolution was passed, a large population of the Muslims, they gathered at the Minto Park. Then it was called as the Minto Park. Today it's called as Iqbal Park. Okay, there they gathered and they came forth with a conviction, a stance that they would work together for the creation of a separate homeland where all the Muslim majority areas would be amalgamated together to form a separate homeland. Okay, and they passed this resolution there. So that is an important point. These are the points that you have to mention under this question. Now you can talk. Another question that has been asked is, how successful were the elections of 1937? Here you can write that these elections were successful for both the parties because Congress won them. Okay, and the Muslim League, why? Because Muslim League learned lot of lessons, and it was because of these elections that the Muslim League was able to reorganize itself and target its energies elsewhere in towards the positive, on the positive side. And uh, and it also made the Muslims of living in India realize that they could not survive if the Congress was in the power. So they had to, fight for a separate homeland for themselves. Another question that has been asked is, explain why the Muslim community objected to the rule of the Congress Party between 1937 and 1939. Again, that's a 7-mark question. Now that is, objections, why the Muslim community objected to the Congress rule. So for this, you can write all the 3 points. Bande Matram, then um, Varda scheme, and you can also mention about the general Congress tyranny. And then you can conclude your answer. So that's the 7 mark question. Various questions can be asked, in different ways, but once you're clear with the topic, you will be able to answer all the questions, no matter what. So just be very clear with the concepts, and all the important points that you have to mention. Okay. Uh, with that, I'll be concluding and wait for my next lessons. In my next lessons, I'll be talking about the Day of Deliverance and also Pakistan resolution. So many important topics are still, coming up. So stay tuned. Till my next class, I'm Nida Umar signing off. Bye bye.